Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Now I'm joined with Alan Lazaros, who is the CEO and founder of Next Level University. He's also the co-host of the Next Level University podcast. Alan, thanks for joining me today.
Dan, first and foremost, we had a great little pre-chat before we hit record, and you're traveling all over the country, and you just came back from Alaska, and you seem very humble and like a good person. So I'm grateful to be here. I want to sandwich the aligned things I do in gratitude. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And for anyone listening or watching, I try to say this every time. What you're giving your attention to is dictating what you think, say, feel, do, and believe, and really what you invest in. And so I don't take it lightly to have your attention, because if I look back at my childhood, and we'll get into this a little bit, it was not a good one. And what I gave my attention to was really not ideal in hindsight. So I'm grateful to be here. And if we're in your ears or your eyes, I think it's a big responsibility. We gotta make sure we help you.
I love that. I love that. Thanks for joining me today. I've been looking forward to this. This has been a long time coming. Originally tried to get this set up before we went to Alaska, but it didn't work out with our schedules. But I always say that when it happens is the perfect time that it should happen. So there is a reason why we were recording this in December, and here we are. So before we get started, though, just introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Alan today?
So it's the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions, and I will go as deep as you want. But ultimately, who am I today? I'm the CEO of Next Level University. It's Next Level U, pun intended. I always talk about how I just turned Allen version 3.6. I was a computer engineer, so everything's numbers for me, so forgive me for that. But Allen version 3.6 is far more effective and more intelligent and more virtuous than Allen version 3.5, and certainly more than Allen version 2.5 and that kind of thing. And so Next Level U is a place that you go to reach your potential, and it's you versus you, not you versus anyone else. And it's really ultimately Kevin was on your show, I think, for episode 119, you said?
Yep.
So my business partner, Kevin, and I both grew up without dads, and we wanted to be sort of male role models, and we're hopefully becoming the male role models that we never had. And so who am I? CEO of Next Level University, podcaster, speaker, coach, and trainer, and primarily coaching at this stage. That's my one main thing, and then everything outside of that is sort of revolving around that.
Love that. I love that. So Next Level University, Next Level U. What does that specifically mean for you, next level, or helping people get to the next level? Because I think that's become a little bit of a trend where it's like, hey, you got to level up, get to your next level. But like, what does it actually mean for, the guy who's involved in Next Level University?
Yeah, the first thing is a deep philosophy. It's a deep belief that no matter how hard your past has been, no matter how hard your present is, there's always, like, you could have a bigger, better, brighter future on the other side of taking personal responsibility. And in hindsight, I grew up in an environment that had very little personal responsibility. I know you have a coaching background, and what a coach helps people with is helps them understand themselves, helps them understand others, and helps them understand the world. And yeah, helps them with skills and, discipline and structure and accountability. But ultimately, next level means if you want your life to improve, you're going to have to improve. And it's a simple idea, but for the longest time, that was not my philosophy. I was achievement oriented, and I was improvement oriented, and I was academically inclined, straight A's in high school, financial aid and scholarships, one of the best engineering colleges, WPI. It's like a mini MIT in Massachusetts. But I wasn't self-improvement oriented. So you can try to change your mom or change your aunt or change your outside stuff, but unless you work on yourself, the outside stuff probably won't solve the real root cause of the stuff. And so a lot of us are trying to change circumstances, and I think that makes sense. Obviously, we all want to make more money. We want to be healthier. We all want to be more in shape. We all want bigger businesses and bigger brands and have a bigger impact. Most people do, right? Most people want similar things. Next Level U is, how do you change it inside first? And once you change it inside, then the person places things and ideas outside of you also transform as a byproduct of your leadership. And that's, I think, really what NLU is all about, which is just holistic self improvement to have a bigger, greater impact. And the last piece of this is leading by example. I can't stand people who don't lead by example. It's
Yeah,
probably my biggest pet peeve. And so playfully, I get a little frustrated. But anyone who's not leading by example, just shut up. Like just shut up.
I
And
agree.
and yeah,
Yeah, it's easy to talk the talk, but if you're not walking the walk, um, it, it doesn't really matter. And that was one of the, going back to my sports background and my coaching background. Um, I knew I could tell players anything I wanted to, but
yep,
I also knew they were watching me and watching my every action. And if I was telling them to do something and then doing the opposite of what I was telling them, you lose that respect immediately. So I'm 100% with you there on, again, don't tell me about it if you're not doing it.
amen to that. I couldn't agree more. And honestly, I think anyone who I people say, well, words lie, actions don't. I actually realized, and this is something you learn as a when you start your own company, you build a team. The largest team I've ever had is 22 people, and I'm still a young leader, so I'm still learning for sure. But it turns out actions lie too. The actions in front of you versus the action. I need to know who you are and what you are when no one's watching.
Exactly.
That's the sign of your true character. And that's what you got to work on first. Instead of looking good out externally, which I've been guilty of too in the past, like try to look better, look better, look better. I always say you can focus on looking better or actually getting better.
Yeah.
And the people who focus on the second one instead of the first one eventually do look better. But it just takes a lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all the process. I tell people all the time, again, going back to my coaching days, is that, I never preached a win at all costs philosophy. I always preached, the process and doing the little things and working on the fundamentals. And then if you're doing all of that stuff in practice when no one's watching, then come game time, the W's will take care of themselves because you're doing all the little things to get yourself in a place to succeed and win. And I think that, that's my philosophy is always about teaching life lessons. So I used the game of baseball to do it for many, many years. And, now I try to teach those lessons through podcasting as well. And I think it's so important because, it's all about just building that up and, doing the little things that make the big things come together. And that's why I love what you guys are doing there at Next Level. It's incredible what you guys are doing for sure.
Thank you, Dan. The fundamentals. Kevin and I joke all the time because we do 1% improvement per day episode every day, but none of it is really shiny or sexy. It's fundamentals, and so we're not exactly going viral. And it's the same fundamentals, consistency compounds, and that's why I think I wish that I had learned about humility earlier because self belief I always had a lot, and humility didn't come till later. To the extent that it does now, but that's why humility is a superpower. Because if you're actually humble, you do the process.
Yeah.
You do the fundamentals. People who are arrogant don't do the fundamentals. They're looking for some quick fix.
Yep.
And I've been guilty of that too. So it's the little things it's that you do behind the scenes when no one's watching that ultimately will make the biggest difference. But that's not where any of the glam is. So it can be, and it takes a long time. We had a big week last week. We made I used to be too much of a coward to share. Made $6,084. I'm a big numbers guy in our business last week. But I told Kev that had nothing to do with what we did last week. That had everything to do with
Yes.
what we did the past 7 years.
Yes.
That compounded over 7.5 years, right? So, and trust me, in the beginning there was no money being made. So, um, yeah, the little fundamentals. Every time I lose sight of the little fundamentals behind the scenes, we always start to lose.
Yep.
Always.
Yep. And again, going back to my baseball roots, I tell people that all the time. I'm like, look, the Dodgers didn't win the World Series in November or late October. They won the World Series in February and
Yes.
March, doing all that work again when there weren't 60,000 fans in the stands. Um, and it again, it translates to life. You don't the win comes from a accumulation of a ton of hard work. I'm sure you've probably seen that, one meme that goes around the internet where it shows the iceberg of success
Yep.
and that, above the water is this much of success, but then underneath there's three times as much of everything else that, you know, got the iceberg above the water, you know?
In my coaching as a business coach, I actually have a iceberg that says results with like a little boat on the side, and then underneath it is systems, tools, uh, mindset, beliefs, values. What are some other ones underneath there? Potential, all these different things, and we actually use it as an assessment.
Yeah.
And I do green, yellow, red. Green means you're good, you have the right tools. Yellow means you need new tools, like you need a new computer, you need a new iPhone, or you need, and then red means you're just struggle bus on that. And I did this recently with one of my clients. Her name's Nikita, and she had two reds on there, and that's where you go to work. And that's why everything's so paradoxical. If you want to improve, I say this to Kev all the time, my business partner, because sometimes it can be really hard to work with me because I'm always looking for what's wrong, because that's what needs to improve. I said, Kev, you're a mate. We're doing 1,000 things well. I just don't talk about them because that's not what needs to change. So we do most important win, most important improvement. And we had to do most important win first because I used to be only most important improvement. So it was constantly focusing on what's wrong and never what's right. And so we do most important win, most important improvement now. But that's one of the things that I think is so paradoxical about self-improvement is if you want to feel good about yourself, you need to focus on all the things you're doing well.
Yes.
But if you actually want to get better, you kind of have to focus on where you suck.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard for people. And I always say this to my clients. I care about your success and your fulfillment more than your feelings. And I need permission in advance to be okay, for that to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm not your friend, I'm your coach. And it doesn't mean I can't be a friend too, but I said this to people. No one else cares about your success and your fulfillment. They care about you as a person.
Yeah.
They don't, your friend isn't like, ooh, I really need to make sure Kev's on point. I say, Kev, we're business partners, man. It's my job and your job to keep each other accountable. There's no way we would have done 1,900 episodes without each other.
Right.
Holding each other accountable to that standard. And that's the value of a team.
Yeah.
And so people say, well, no one can achieve anything great alone. And that's so true. However, one great player can make a great team by leading by example.
Yeah.
And so, again, another paradox. And so that's been fascinating. My 30s have been very eye-opening because I never fully agreed with that. I remember when I was younger, I would hear, well, no one achieves anything great alone. I remember thinking there's more to it than that. Because one Michael Jordan can make a great team by leading by example and by setting the standard and by setting the pace. However, he definitely couldn't have done it without Scottie Pippen. But
Yep.
He is who attracted a Scottie Pippen, right? That kind of thing. So I'm starting to finally understand that everything's a paradox and that everything is duality. And anyone who's saying only one side of the coin is pretty much not seeing the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you talked about how throughout your growth as a leader, where you know, again, don't focus on just what needs to be improved. You are celebrating those little wins as well. And I think that's so important to kind of keep that balance because, you have to, whether it's coaching somebody in business or coaching somebody in sports, you got to celebrate those little wins and, recognize the progress, but then go back and, okay, but let's work on this, okay, now we did that. Now let's work on this. So it's great to hear how you've kind of evolved as a leader and a coach as well in that way,
And that was through pain and failure because I used
Usually it is. Usually it is.
I went through a phase where it was all about the wins and making everyone feel good about themselves because I wasn't courageous enough to tell them the truth and give hard feedback. And then it swung the pendulum the other way and it was only hard feedback. And I eventually got to the center point. I think I'm closer to center. Obviously, no one's fully centered. But I'm closer to the center now where I celebrate the progress and give the feedback to continue the progress. But I definitely, that was just through, like I said, the largest team I've ever had is 22 people. And I always say leadership is the hardest thing in the world. It's brutal because you just screw up constantly.
Yeah.
And everyone's so different. I want to hear everything that's wrong. Like, give me all the feedback about everything that's wrong. Other people, they're very sensitive to, that. And so you have to understand who can handle it and who can't. And then I always say you can't teach advanced calculus to a 7-year-old unless they're a
Right.
prodigy. So you have to know who your prodigies are. It really is. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's very challenging because
Yeah.
I realized I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but I also want to help people grow. And you can't grow unless you get uncomfortable, but you have to do it in a way that is with curiosity, empathy, and courage. And the courage piece for me was the hardest because I just didn't have the courage to tell people the truth, especially when they weren't being humble, because they think I'm arrogant. So it's no. I'm not arrogant. If my self-belief is level 10 and I have level 8 humility, I'm going to appear level 2 arrogant. It doesn't, but I'm the one reading the books every day. I listened to 2 TED Talks this morning. So I'm humble in my actions, even though I come off as very arrogant. So it's just been a journey of realizing almost everyone is inaccurate about themselves, others, in the world. And the only way to become more accurate is to assess yourself and others from this very objective lens that's very hard to look through because we all have blind spots and rose-colored glasses, or we're overly pessimistic, or we're overly optimistic. So you have to figure out where you fit. If you don't have self-awareness, you're not going to see the world accurately. It's like a self-driving car that thinks there's a road when it's really a cliff, and then it just keeps driving off a cliff and then blaming the world. And so
Right.
I feel like that's the reason why I read this stat in early January, because we do monthly meetups every month, and it was setting clear goals for 2024. And I read this stat: only 4% of people have written goals, only 8% of them achieve them. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? Because I've never not had written goals, and I've never not achieved them. However, achievement has always come easy to me. It was the core values and the inner work that never came easy. So I always say, if you want a coach, you need a therapist. If you want a therapist, you probably need a coach.
Right.
And obviously both modalities do both, right? But I needed a therapist. And if we dig into my childhood at all, we'll figure out why. But ultimately, I think you're really good at one of two things. Most people are really good at relationships, or they're really good at competence and reverse engineering finish lines and systems and structure and discipline, or you're really good with people. So Kevin's really good with people. I'm really good with systems and structures, and we hopefully have learned from each other, and fortunately have learned from each other, because Kevin and I would give the same speech, and I think mine's better, objectively, and everyone loved him and hated me. And I was like, but my speech was more valuable. I don't get it. Oh, okay. So everyone else is emotionally driven. I'm an engineer. People think I'm a dick. So I have to figure this out, right? So I'm much more well-rounded now. Hopefully.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your childhood. You lost your dad at 2. Um, what type of effect did that have on you? Growing up without that, male role model, and eventually lead you to where you are today.
Yeah, so my father passed away at 2. I had an older sister who was 6. My mom was 31 at the time. And then my stepfather came into the picture when I was 3. And from 3 to 14, I had a stepfather. My real last name is actually McCorkle. And big Irish Catholic family. John McCorkle was my dad. Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette. It was 6 J's. And so when he passed away, though, we sort of became the Lazaroses, so we didn't really associate much with the McCorkles anymore. And I never used to have the courage to share any of this, certainly not on a public medium, but my stepdad came into the picture. I took his last name, I think around 6 or 7. My mom asked if I wanted to, and I said yes. And then he left at 14. He worked for a company called AGFA, AGFA. They did hospital computers back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and so we did very well. Snowmobiles and ski trips, and we had a yacht, and the 90s were wild. I mean, everyone did well. Not everyone, but particularly in the U.S., the biggest economy on planet Earth, the 90s were a wild time.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like everyone had money. And I only look back, because when you're a kid, you don't know. I mean, you have no idea, but it's just, I mean, everyone was just running amok, in my opinion, particularly my parents. And my mom and stepdad didn't get along. That's a polite way to put it. And they loved to party. And so all the people they associated with loved to party. And so Their philosophy on life was very pleasure centered paradigm. It's a deep belief that life is about having as much fun as possible, which I actually think is wildly detrimental. Um, and I think there was some serious emotional immaturity and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, my stepdad leaves, takes 90% of the income with him. 14 was the hardest year of my life. Didn't know this at the time, only in therapy. In hindsight, have I realized all this? Stepdad leaves. We go from boats, ski trips, snowmobiles, motorcycles, mom drives a BMW, to I get free lunch at school now because our income is so low. He takes his entire extended family with him. I still, to this day, haven't seen or spoken to a single one of them.
Oh,
And that same time, my sister moves out with her older boyfriend, understandable. Same time, mom gets in a fight with my Aunt Sandy, and my Aunt Sandy ostracizes us from my mom's side. And we still don't really associate much with the McCorkles. So by the time I'm 14, in some ways, I kind of lost 3 families.
right.
So you want to talk about normal? I just have never known normal. And I'm not normal at all. And I mean this statistically. I don't mean like,
Right.
oh, I'm weird. I mean statistically, I'm very, very weird. Very abnormal, very statistically on the far end of, most bell curves. And then on top of that, my trauma response to all that was sort of Goodwill Hunting-esque. It was, abandonment, try to hang on to all my friends and family. I brought my high school friends to college, my college friends to corporate. And I was sort of this weird, semi-gifted, semi-genius, abandonment issue achiever. And I didn't know any of that at the time. I just thought I was being me. And back
Right.
then I thought everyone believed in themselves, so I didn't get it. I was looking for male role models everywhere. Couldn't find any good ones. And in hindsight, I am alarmed. I'm disappointed wildly. Half the people I got advice from I shouldn't have. But that's only in hindsight, right? Your heroes always fall from the pedestal, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's the shortest possible version. Then I remember my dream was to go to WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's like a mini MIT, as I mentioned. And it was $50,000 a year. And when my stepdad left, how the hell am I going to go?
Right.
I can't afford that. So I got straight A's through all of high school. I got what's called the President's Award. It's behind me. It's signed by George W. Bush. And I got all the scholarships and financial aid that I could possibly get. And I got in. And I got my computer engineering degree. I got my master's in business. And it was off to the races. And this is post-2008. So 2011, I graduated my bachelor's. 2012 is my master's. And at this point, the economy's coming back, especially in tech. So iRobots, Inside Technologies, Oz Development, Lens Americas, Cognex, all these companies. And I went from a broke high school and college student to I'm making all this money. 65 to 85, 85 to 105, 105 to 125, 125 to almost $200,000 a year. And that's not abnormal for a computer engineer, honestly. Right. I mean, especially an achiever one who's trying to prove himself. And then eventually I got in my own car accident. So I'm 26. I get in my car accident. Physically, I'm okay, fortunately, because I'm driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat. I remember I bought this $5,000 cash because I just wanted to pay off all my school debt and a bunch of money in the stock market. And I was so used to being broke, I didn't need much. My rent was $500. I lived on a lake with my girlfriend Courtney at the time. I drove that 2004 Volkswagen Passat. I paid off $84,000 worth of debt in a single year back in 2014, and then I just put all my money in Vanguard and stocks, tech companies. I'm 26. I'm in New Hampshire. This is back in 2015. And there's only 2 human beings that came back from my mom's side. One is my Aunt Kathy. I've seen her once. And the other one is my cousin Jeff. He has a son named Dan. My second cousin Dan was in the car with me. I end up on the wrong side of the road. My fault. I was supposed to yield and didn't. 2015, New Hampshire, the snowbanks were covering the yield sign. And I look up and I see what I thought was a Mack truck. My fault, wrong side of the road. It wasn't a Mack truck, it was a lift-kitted pickup truck, fortunately. And thank you, Volkswagen, because I used to call this car the Tank. This was a German-engineered, heavy-set steel trap of a car. I literally called it the Tank, and that car totally saved my life. Both airbags deployed. I mean, the whole front end is completely smashed in, but the frame stayed. And if I was in some little Honda, there's no way.
Right.
So I'm so grateful for that car. But that, physically, we were okay. He hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face on the airbag. We were definitely rattled, but no permanent damage. mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, though, my dad died in a car when he was 28. I've seen pictures of his car. I've
Right.
seen pictures of my car. They don't look very different. And so this was my sort of quarter life existential crisis. This is the second chance my dad never got. And I turned it all around after that. I mean, I quit drinking. I quit all drugs. It's not like I was doing a ton of drugs or anything, but I was definitely drinking too much and too often. I wasn't taking care of my health. I was achievement oriented, but I wasn't self-improvement oriented. And that's when some people have a job, some people have a career, some people have a calling. That's when I got into my calling.
Yeah.
And after that, I liquidated all my assets. I went past broke. Started a little company called Alan Lazaros LLC, what you'll never learn in school but desperately need to know. And it was about personal development, essentially. I wanted to bring personal development to the school systems because I remember thinking, like, why didn't we learn this in school? Like, this is empathy and communication and trust and emotional intelligence and fitness and finance. Like, why didn't I take a finance course till I was in graduate school?
Yeah.
Most people don't even get there, right? We use money every day. We eat food every day. We learn nothing about this.
Yeah.
So it was just alarming to me. So I decided to create my own company, and that not failed, but it wasn't super successful. And then I had a little podcast. So did Kevin. He was my first guest. I was his first guest. We went all in on his show eventually, and then we rebranded to what's now Next Level University. And the through line, though, underneath it all is I found self-improvement when I was 26 years old, and that was 10 years ago. And I'm telling you, I dialed that shit up to 11. I got every book and every course, and I just, from that moment 10 years ago to now, I started working on me.
I love it.
Every day I'm working on me, and now I encourage others to do the same, and that's my whole life now.
Yeah. It's so important because, I've said it on several different shows. I mean, you get to a point where, you just can't fill from an empty cup. So you really have to focus on you first and then be able to spread that to others and create a ripple effect from, from what you've accomplished and what you've learned, in your own life and then pass that on to others. But if if your cup's empty, you can't do that. So I think that's such an important lesson. So, Alan, we're just about out of time, but is there anything you missed that you think would be important to the listeners before you start to wrap things up?
There's a book called The Virtue of Selfishness that I was very averse to in the beginning because it's very paradoxical. To put yourself first sounds selfish. But if you go back to what we talked about with leading by example, it's not. Becoming a better version of you. Like, I think of it self-awareness, number one, self-acceptance, number two, and then self-improvement, number three. But it has to be in that order. I think the old me used to do self-improvement, but from this, I want to be different than I am. I want to be different than I am. And now it's self-awareness first. Like, oh, okay, so I am kind of an esoteric weirdo who studies Einstein on the side. That's weird. Okay, I am kind of a semi-genius dude who's too afraid to admit it and own it and definitely can't talk about it because it's not politically correct or socially correct. You can't call yourself a genius. Even though the geniuses know they are, they just can't admit it. They can't own it. It's weird. Anything that separates you and takes away belonging, you become very scared of.
Yeah.
So the non-gifted amongst us, we're afraid we're not good enough. And then the gifted amongst us are pretending we're not because we're afraid we're too much for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I trigger anyone who's insecure about their intelligence, I trigger the hell out of them, especially men. And if they're not emotionally mature, how do they react? Whammo, put me down, whatever it takes, run away, you name it, and then add that to abandonment issues. Hello. So is there anything I missed? Self-awareness is learn about you. Self-acceptance is accept who and what you are. Good, bad, ugly. Particularly good. Unique. And then self-improvement. I mean, I probably didn't start really doing that until my 30s because I didn't really become super self-aware until way later. I understood the economy, and I understood science, technology, engineering, mathematics, business, and finance, and professional development, LinkedIn, cover letter, resume, professional development to the T. I knew how businesses were run. I didn't know how I was running. I didn't understand my trauma and how that was affecting me and what was really motivating me at the deepest level. So yeah, self-awareness first, self-acceptance second, and then self-improvement third. And if you run that formula, you're gonna I mean, you're going to achieve not only your goals and dreams, but you're actually going to be fulfilled when you do, because those goals and dreams are actually in alignment with who you really are.
Yeah.
Because take it from me, I've achieved a lot of goals, and some of them I was not fulfilled at all once I did. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. I love that. Alan, how do people find you if they want to reach out to you, find out more about Next Level University? Where can they track Alan down or, find out more about what you guys are doing?
So we have a website called nextleveluniverse.com, spelled just like it sounds. As pretentious as this sounds, you can Google my name. Never used to be able to say that, but now you definitely can. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Here's what I'll end with. If you have humility and work ethic and grit, and you want to earn your way every day to success and fulfillment, you're going to love me, you're going to love Kevin, you're going to love NLU, you're going to love what we do. If you have any level of entitlement, and if you have low work ethic and you're lazy, and you want big rewards for minimal effort, do not ever reach out to me. You're not going to like me, you're not going to like Kevin, and you're not going to like NLU. Because we are the tryhards who came from very little.
Yeah.
And if you are entitled on any level, we're just going to be a mirror that you're not going to like, and I don't want to deal with it. So, yeah, that's what I would end with is please reach out if you do have humility and you reach out. Please just provide context, because obviously we all get a lot of spam.
Yeah. 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 Good luck looks a lot like hard work, they say,
Yeah.
too many people don't buy into that. So, Alan, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is "Many Little People in Many Little Places," which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, "Gloria," which go, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes." So it's one of the little things that Alan does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I never expected this, but I have more people habit tracking than maybe, not anyone, obviously, but I tracked it recently. It was 114 when I tracked it. I have dozens, if not hundreds of people tracking habits and metrics every day. All my clients, all my team members, myself included. And so the little thing I do each day that I think is having a big impact is I track my metrics and habits. I use Google Sheets. It's free. And I have so many other people through that example on train tracks toward their goals and dreams because of that simple habit. So people always ask me, what's your most important habit? Habit tracking. It's like a meta habit. Yeah. So it's a habit that keeps me on track with my habits. And so I'm not perfect by any means, but I've been tracking habits for 10 years now. And that has rippled into so many lives, and it's been super transformative. I mean, Kevin would tell you the same thing. People always ask, what's the most important habit? And I always say, habit tracking.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. Folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, check out our Pay It Forward program, where you can buy a copy of one of my books, and Sandy and I will donate it to someone along the way in our travels. Alan, this is an incredible conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to connecting down the road if we're ever up in your area. We'll look you up for sure.
Please do, Dan. Thank you so much for having me, and keep doing what you're doing, because I hope that self-improvement continues to spread, because when I was a kid, it was not nearly as ubiquitous.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Again, thanks a lot for the conversation. It was great.